Falkirk Council's Convener of Planning. And before we go into the item, I'm going to make the introductions and go right to my right here.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Alf Kelly.
Good evening, Councillor Gordon Forrest.
Good evening, Provost Robert Bissett. I'm a councillor for Falkirk North Ward.
Now go to remote. That's all the members that's in here in this evening. I'll go to remote, and of the members that's on remote, could you maybe introduce themselves, please?
Councillor Gary Bowes, Cascade and Trist.
Councillor Alan Nimmo, Labour Councillor for Grangemouth.
Bailey James Kerr.
Councillor Laura Murtagh, Independent Cascade and Trist.
And we also have Councillor Sinclair.
Convener, thank you and apologies for my lateness.
No problem, thank you, sir. We have a number of officials here with us as well this evening, and some online, so we'll go with the ones that are here this evening from my left.
Thank you, Convener. Ian Henderson, Legal Services Manager. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Convener. Bernard Whittle, Development Management Coordinator.
Thank you. It's Catherine Chorley, Planning Officer.
Thanks, Convener. It's Richard Broadley, Senior Planning Manager.
Thanks, Convener. It's Gemma MacArthur, Committees Officer.
Jim Miller, Committee Services Team Leader.
Thank you. We'll go online now. Officers that are online, would just like to introduce themselves.
Joan McClellan, Senior Strategy Officer within Housing.
Alistair Shaw, Development Plan Coordinator in Place Services.
Gary McGregor, Engineering Design Manager, Place Services.
Craig Russell, Network Coordinator, Place Services.
Matthew Orr, Transport Planning Coordinator, Place Services.
Graham Lowe, representing Transport Planning Unit.
Is Richard Teed there?
Yeah, Richard Teed. I'm Senior Forward Planning Officer in Children's Services.
Okay, thank you for that. This meeting is being held in Grangemouth Community Education Unit 6971 Abbots Road, Grangemouth, and remotely as well today, Tuesday the 24th of September, beginning at 6 o'clock. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, it has been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. The meeting will also be live streamed. Could I say at this fairly early stage that no decision will be taken at this meeting? The decision for this application will be taken at a full planning meeting, which will be held in the next day. We'll hopefully get a date shortly. Thank you for that. First of all, I'll go there. Any apologies?
No apologies have been submitted, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to item 2 on your agenda, declaration of interest. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time? No. Unrecorded. Fine, thank you. That takes us to item 3 on your agenda this evening. It's a predetermination hearing procedures, and for that it's pages 2 to 4 on your agenda papers, and it'll be our Legal Services Manager, Mr. Ian Henderson, will take us through it. Thank you, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Convener. And if we could move to the next slide, please. So thank you. I think we can move to the next slide again. So the process that will be followed tonight is that the convener will ask the planning officer, who will present the report which forms part of the agenda papers, to the meeting. Can you move forward? Next slide, please. Following that, the convener will invite the applicant or the applicant's agent as appropriate, and also any statutory consultees who may be present to speak in relation to the application, which is to be determined at a future meeting. And in terms of the timings, the applicant has 10 minutes to speak to their proposal, and statutory consultees have 5 minutes each to speak to the matter. Thank you. At that point, members of the committee are able to ask questions of the applicant's agent, statutory consultees, or indeed the officers in attendance at the meeting this evening. Thank you. Following that, parties that have made representations will be entitled to speak to the committee or be heard before the committee. And that's for up to a time of 5 minutes for each party. And it's also available to the convener of the meeting where there's maybe matters of repetition to ask that a spokesperson speak on behalf of group representations. It would be 5 minutes per party wishing to speak, but if a group is heard, it would be 10 minutes available to speak before the committee. Thanks. This is by way of a note, and it follows on from what I've just said, but the convener who manages the meeting is able to limit the number of speakers that may be addressing the committee on any particular point, which may be subject to repetition before the committee. Thank you. Following parties that have made representations being heard, the applicant has a right of reply to matters that have been raised during the course of the meeting up until that point. Following that, members of the committee again have an opportunity to ask questions of any party, including the officers in attendance at the meeting. Thank you. After that, members of the committee are able to identify any planning issues that they may wish to see specifically addressed in the report, which will go to a future meeting of the planning committee. And following that, the convener will close the meeting. I think we still have another slide to follow up on that. So these are for information slides, but there is to be no cross-examination at the meeting, and all remarks should be directed through the convener of the meeting, who I mentioned will manage the course of the meeting. And thank you. Next slide. By way of a note, if anyone is not able to appear at the hearing this evening, the committee is still enabled to proceed with the business without hearing that party. Next slide, please. And broadly, the convener of the meeting is responsible for ensuring that matters are conducted in accordance with the principles of natural justice and also with efficiency. And just as a final note, I've already mentioned, but no decision on the application will be taken at this hearing this evening. As I've mentioned, this is an opportunity for parties to be heard before a committee of the council before the decision is taken, but the decision will be subject to a report which will be taken by officers to a future meeting of the planning committee. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Henderson. That takes us to item 4 on your agenda, minute and report. Item 4A, minute of meeting of the planning predetermination hearing held on the 27th of April 2023. It's pages 5 to 11 on your agenda papers. Have we any questions arising from that minute, or can we agree the minute?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 4B, development of land for residential use, landscaping and open space at Roughlands Farm, Mill Road, Carnshaw, Falkirk for Taylor Wimpey. It's pages 12 to 83 on your agenda papers, and the report is by our planning officer, Catherine Chorley. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, convener. Jim, can I ask if you put up the indicative master plan, please? Thank you. Thanks, Jim. You can see up on your screen an indicative master plan that was submitted with the planning application. This is the result of some discussions that have been carried out through the assessment of the application, and it's just indicative at the moment because it's a planning permission in principle. So the application originally came in 2022, and it was designated as being significantly contrary to the development plan, which is why we had an initial predetermination hearing in April 2023. The minutes are attached to your report documents. The application was really held in abeyance following appeals and a court case at West Lothian, although we did continue discussing issues with the application during that time. The appeal is referred to as the Moss End appeal. That went to a court case and has now been determined. So we are now progressing this application back to a decision with yourselves. So the application is for housing. It's approximately 150 units. Again, this is just indicative at this time, with 25% affordable housing provision. You can see from the site plan that it's an irregular shape. It takes in agricultural land, although in the northeast corner there are 3 residential properties there at the moment. It is predominantly agricultural in nature though. Down to the southern end of the site is a protrusion that runs along the side of the road and was originally proposed to take a drainage route to the Chapel Burn, but now is also potentially proposed to incorporate pedestrian access to the site. The site is designated as Greenbelt and is considered countryside, and the proposal includes 2 accesses, one on Ruthlands Drive to the southeast and one on Western Avenue. As part of the continued discussion on the application, the applicant has submitted updated documents, including a new planning position statement, taking into consideration policies in the National Planning Framework 4 and material considerations that they consider relevant. The report includes consultation responses, which were rerun and updated, given the delay in determining the application. These are included in your report. There are updated information on contributions to education provision, and we have written in the report that we are awaiting a response from the NHS. This still has not been received. Following the drafting of the report, we also received 2 additional representations, which I'll summarise now. Concerns that Karen Shaw is becoming overcrowded, roads are at capacity, flooding is getting worse. LDP3 encourages green awareness and outdoor access. The proposal would detract from this. Council costs and bills will rise, impacts will be felt by taxpayers. Another objection read that the updated indicative master plan and second access point are of concern, and the aim should be to minimise traffic using Ruthlands Drive and Webster Avenue. As has been said previously, we will carry out a full assessment of the proposal, and this will be presented back to yourselves at the planning committee. We also have access to photos if those would be helpful. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Catherine. The next part of the planning predetermination hearing process, after the council officer presents the report, is that I'm going to invite the applicant or their agent to come forward. Can you just take yourselves up to that seat up there? Thank you. Now, the position is quite simple. You've been here before. You'll have a 10-minute period, and then after you've did your submission, there'll be an opportunity for members to ask any questions. So, first of all, could you maybe all, the 4 of you there, introduce yourselves, what your designation is, and then carry on. I'll tell you when you've got the 10 minutes, okay?
Thank you very much. My name is Colin Lavetti. I'm a planning agent from a company called Stantec.
Good evening, I'm Naomi Cunningham. I'm Senior Strategic Land and Planning Manager at Taylor Wimpey.
Good evening, I'm Phil Cooper. I am Land Planning Director at Taylor Wimpey.
Okay, thank you. You've got 10 minutes from now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe just move to the first slide, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to present the application in front of you. If you can just move to that's the presentation structure. I think the key point for us tonight, as the case officers picked up as the application's been in for a fair length of time, the key aspects that we're looking to pick up on is to particularly update members on progress of the application and some of the current context and material considerations which were mentioned earlier, and also provide an update on our understanding of housing need within the area. Next slide, please. The proposed development, I won't repeat all this because the case officer's done a good job, but it is a planning permission in principle application. There is 2 vehicular access points. One of those was actually added following discussions with the council. We originally proposed the access of Webster Avenue, and as part of the development, you noticed the master plan earlier, there's significant areas of open space totaling 1.6 hectares, which is part of a comprehensive landscape strategy which we aim to create an attractive semi-rural settlement edge, incorporating existing landscape features and essentially establish a strong network of open spaces linking people from the site to the surrounding network. There is new walking cycling path proposed along the north boundary. That's something else that was requested that we've agreed as part of the indicative plan. And as the case officer mentioned, we've explored a potential pedestrian link to the south to join the core path. And as per Taylor Wimpey's approach, we're looking to provide energy efficient net zero homes with good design. Next slide, please. Yeah, I won't say too much on the indicative layout. I think it's been explained already. On the right-hand side there, you just see a kind of an example of the type of approach that could be taken to the landscaping and green space within the site. And yeah, as was mentioned, the kind of strange shape that's the long shape going down to the bottom is now potentially dual purpose in terms of drainage and also a pedestrian link to the south to connect with the core path. Next slide, please. Just to reiterate, in terms of economic benefits, I won't, you can see these on your screen, but to take a couple out, it's potentially 215 construction jobs, almost 200,000 of potential council tax revenue, and a number of other kind of benefits in terms of investment. And as we've highlighted at the bottom, the updated education contributions figure been requested is £750,000, which Taylor Wimpey have agreed to pay should we get consent. And as has been noted, we're still waiting to hear from NHS Forth Valley, I believe, in terms of what any potential healthcare contributions will be. Next slide, please. Just in terms of the point about the potential footpath, this has been something we've discussed with officers for a prolonged period of time. We have actually presented 2 potential options for how we would get from the site down to the core path. The option 1 there does involve a new crossing to take people across the road. There's more space over there, linking with the western part of the core path. The option on the right, option 2, is goes down within the site boundary and is effectively a 2-metre wide path that would take you from the site down to the south to connect with the core path. So this is still indicative. We have had fairly detailed discussions with the planning officer that we feel that this could be conditioned if the council were to approve the planning application to make sure this is delivered by Taylor Wimpey. Next slide, please. Yeah, members will be aware of that National Planning Framework 4 and the requirement for local living in 20-minute neighbourhood. We've already submitted a design and access statement and a detailed transport assessment, which gives a lot more information regarding the accessibility of the site, access to services. I appreciate you might not be able to read the key that you see there, but there is access to schools, shops, post offices, pharmacies, churches, etc., which are all local amenities that are expected to be achievable within a certain distance as part of the new planning framework. Next slide, please. In terms of the site history, I think it's worth reiterating the site has been promoted historically for over 10 years. In 2010, the Scottish Government reporter recommended the site was actually removed from the Greenbelt and considered for an option. That wasn't taken forward. In 2015, the next plan cycle, the reporter acknowledged the site would have some logic, or might have some logic, as a future development opportunity. And as recently as 2020, when the current LDP was going through examination, The reporter, Scottish Government reporter, did confirm that they seen the site as being a rounding off of development in the area. Our own landscape and visual impact assessment, which is in front of the council, has also agreed that it would be a rounding up or infilling of the existing settlement edge. The site is obviously greenbelt, we heard that earlier. With the settlement edge, there is an opportunity to enhance this with appropriate planting using native species, and this is something we've provided initial detail for, and we're very much looking to retain trees and hedgerows as much as possible and improve habitat linkages. Our view is that any historic concerns over landscape impact can be addressed, and this site should very much be seen as a natural infill and not an isolated out of settlement location like many others. Change slide, please. In terms of the application, just going back to, it was during COVID, we had comprehensive community engagement with over 700 people visit our website. We've always been very transparent and open to collaborating with the council and consultation responses to try and respond to comments that have come in. We didn't have any contact from any community councils, although I understand some of the boundaries may have changed of late. There has been regular communication. It was pleasing to hear the case officer note that. We've had a number of meetings, some of which were attended by Rhodes colleagues. And as we've already detailed, we have made some pretty positive amendments to the indicative layout, but acknowledging that it is planning in principle at this stage. As far as we're aware, we've only got one objection now from any consultees, and that's from the Rhodes TPU, Transport Planning Unit, but there's some context to that in terms of discussions we've had with planning, and I think we're both in agreement that those matters which TPU are still concerned about could be conditioned as part of any consent. And as far as we're aware, we're concerned, any residual matters coming from consultees are matters of kind of detailed design that we could easily address at approval of matter specified stage. So we're very much keen to move towards a positive determination. Next slide, please. In terms of the current context, we've got a case, I'm sure members will be aware from other cases, but we've got a case now with MPF4 where policy 16 it is, I should say, conflicts with the council's own LDP policy, which allows for sites without allocations to be approved. The Scottish Government recently have declared, obviously, a housing being a national outcome and a national housing emergency as recent as May this year. And as far as we are concerned, the use of the terminology emergency emphasises the need to take action urgently rather than await the outcome of the council's next LDP, which may be a number of years away. As far as we're concerned, this should be a significant material consideration in the context of housing applications. And as recently, the Scottish Government's Chief Planner's letter from June this year signals the intention to engage to expand housing land supply nationally to meet the needs of population. And I believe there's been a further Chief Planner's communication issued in the last week, just reiterating the need to try and address housing land supply. In terms of the Moss End case and some of the, that was mentioned earlier, some of the case law that's came forward, we consider that policy 16 has one section of it to do with non-allocated sites. We consider that we meet all other aspects of MPF4 and the LDP. Thank you, Kavina. As far as we're concerned, suitable proposals which can assist in the supply and the range of housing should be given proper consideration as part of a balanced planning judgment. After all, that's what's required by Section 25 of the Planning Act. Next slide, please. Just putting up here, these reports, I'm aware, have been submitted to the council, but it's recent research undertaken on behalf of Homes for Scotland to look at understanding housing need. Next slide, please. The conclusions of this report are that there's over 20,000 households in Falkirk that are in need and may require additional housing to be built. That's against a 10-year land requirement that's been set currently at just over 5,000 new homes. Our message today is the policy context here has changed with MPF4, but the same principle applies. There's a big under-provision of new homes, and a significant number of new homes and housing sites are required over and above what's already in the LDP to address your needs going forward. Next slide, please. We do acknowledge the sites in the Greenbelt, but assessment needs to be holistic and balanced when it comes in front of members. We think the site history confirms the site's logical and appropriate. It's not prime agricultural land. It does comply, aside from one aspect of policy 16, it does comply with the development plan, and we feel the housing emergency is a material consideration. Next slide, please. Just in conclusion, it's an attractive and accessible residential development with sustainable location. There's been a lot of improvements made in terms of a strong master plan. Only one objection from consultees, I think, says it all in terms of the technical strength of the submission and there's no constraints to delivery. And as emphasised nationally by the Chief Planner, a proper balanced assessment would confirm that this proposal does actually comply with the development plan overall. And this is set against the national housing emergency and the recent reports that record that not just Scotland-wide but Falkirk area is in huge need for additional housing. Accordingly, we respectfully request that the application be supported when presented to members following this meeting.
Thank you very much for your submission, sir. It's now an opportunity for the members of the committee who will be invited to question the applicant's agent. So I'm opening it up to members at this stage. Any questions arising? Councillor Flynn.
Yep, thank you, convener. I have a few questions. The first one, I just take them in order. It mentions the number of construction jobs, and it mentions what do you call it? Supply chain jobs. I just wonder, I'm only thinking this through. These supply chain jobs will not, I'm guessing, be exclusive to your site. In other words, there'll be companies that are providing items, services to other builders, companies that. Is that true? And if so, what percentage of the supply chain jobs would be allocated to your site? That's my first question.
That's obviously a very good question. Now, we instructed a socio and economic benefits statement to be prepared specifically for the site, for what it could deliver for the local area. And this is what we've been provided by the consultant instructed for that. And we don't immediately have to hand the percentage number to give you, but we can potentially delve into that and provide that to you.
Okay, that would be something, convener, that I guess we can obviously get for the future meeting. No, that's fine, thank you. Second question is, it's really to clarify my brain. You say it's not prime agricultural land. By what definition is that?
Most local authorities in Scotland will use a land classification tool. I believe it's a company called the Macaulay Institute that releases that, and that's the kind of industry standard. Quite early on in the process of this application, because when MPF4 effectively came into force during our application being live, we did confirm this with the case officer just to be sure that we both agreed on the sources. And there's different land classification, but there's certain categories. I think it's numbers up to 1 up to 3.1. Not to bamboozle you with numbers, they're the classification that are classed as prime. Our site, I believe, is classification 3.2, which means that in planning purposes, it's not defined as prime agricultural land.
So if it's taking your points there, if it's 1 up to, did you say 3.1? Yeah, that's right. Then yeah. And it's 3.2, so it's only 0.1. I don't know if it's a percentage or just a number, but it's only 0.1 outside the definition of prime agricultural land. So I'm kind of assuming it's kind of close to being prime agricultural land, although it's just slightly outside. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, if I can come back on that. No, I don't. The scale is not. It's not a case of sites can be 2.8, 2.9, 3, 3.1. I couldn't tell you why the numbering does go from 1 to 3.1, but I don't think it's intended as it's close to prime land. Anything 3.2, it's just not. It's not prime agricultural land. So I'm not. We could provide more further clarity from a kind of soils expert as to why it's classified that way, but it's not a kind of sliding scale to that level of detail as far as I'm aware.
Okay. My next question, which I'm not entirely sure it's addressed to yourself, but convener, I'm sure, will guide me. You mentioned there's been only one objection, but what legally happens to the objections that were raised the last time this case was raised, because I believe there was quite a large number of objections. They don't obviously just disappear, do they? So I'm not sure who can answer that. Apologies.
I'll bring Mr. Henderson in for that one.
Thank you, Convener. It's my understanding that it was objections from statutory consultees that were being referred to, as opposed to objections or indeed letters of support from parties more generally making representations on the application. I don't know if that helps, Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, it does. So it means that there will be, if it's from the general population, if you like, there will be objections either sat there that's carried forward or could be in future. No, that's fine. No, thank you for clarifying that, And then my final question really relates to, it's probably a roads question. Is that okay, Convener? May I? I'll give you the question, and it can be decided if it can be answered or not. I'm well familiar with that area, having lived nearby for 13 years some time ago, and I'm familiar with Webster Avenue, Rufflands Drive, and from my viewpoint, from having driven it many hundreds of times, first of all, if you turn into Rufflands Drive, there is effectively a blind spot as you go around the farm buildings, which I see as I've always in the past, in my opinion, purely been dangerous. I just wonder what roads analysis has been done, because you've got a fast road going down Webster Avenue, which is quite narrow. You've got that snag point there. It also leads on to two, I don't know what they call them, but awkward areas, where the road sort of wants to divide at the bottom, and then it joins the road, the Cairn Road. I just wonder what information has come back from roads department on the risks or the increased traffic and the impact, if that makes sense.
Yes,
Thank you.
Roads officers online. Is it going to be Craig or your colleague, Craig?
It'll be myself, Convener.
Fine.
So it was a good question by Councillor Flynn, through you. Obviously, it's PPP stage at this time, and with the indicative layouts that we have are only indicative. We'll need to go through full detail at detailed planning stage. We have looked at visibility displays of both junctions. Obviously, the existing junction off Webster Avenue into Rufflands is existing. The two junctions that we're looking at in terms of going into Webster and going into Rufflands, there is one area where the visibility displays out with the control of the applicant, but these things are acceptable at present and can be covered at detailed full planning stage.
Okay, no, thank you. I look forward to seeing that in future. And thank you, Convener. My final question, which is really more of an education question, but the agent and his or her colleagues will maybe be answering it. It's mentioned the impact on the schools, the different primary schools and obviously the high school, etc. Now, there is, I believe, a proposal for an extension to Kinnaird, which was approved at some stage in the last year or two, which will impact considerably. I just wondered what the cumulative effect of, should this go forward and be approved at any future stage, cumulative effect of the number of children that would be in this particular development, in addition to any proposed development that would be just off the Bellsdyke Road at the edge of Kinnaird, because it's quite significant. Thank you.
I think Richard Teed's online. We'll bring Richard in for this.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Flynn. Yeah, this application's been considered in the context of all proposals, current and proposed in the local development plan in the wider Larbert area. So that is one of the reasons why a contributions requested for Larbert High School, because of the high occupancies currently and continuing high occupancies and the continued house building interest in the area. So so it is considered in the wider context.
So would Richard, would we or I be able to get the definitive numbers from both these sites, future planning meetings, so that I know the numbers that I'm looking at? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can give you the wider numbers.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Convener. That's me.
No, thank you for your input, sir. Now, any other member like to come in at this stage? Councillor Forrest.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn touched on it and then he moved on very quickly, unfortunately. It's just one simple question. You mentioned 215 jobs would be created. If you don't know them, right, could you add that into the other bits and pieces that you're going to supply? But how many of them would be local?
I think just reflecting the response earlier, because it's the economic benefit stats we've got are based on industry standard calculations for the number of units being delivered and what would be produced. This is planning permission and principle stage, so clearly we don't actually know for sure, if we get consent, how many houses will actually be built on the site. You'll appreciate that can change. We would certainly be able to provide more information at the detailed design stage or approval of matter specified conditions, because at that point we would have a fixed design for the site and certainly much closer to the construction phase, where we understand how long the phasing would be, what the actual construction is going to be on the site. So it's just not something that at this stage in the planning process we would be able to give you an exact breakdown, because the honest reason being it's subject to change as planning and permission in principle, but we would be able to provide that hopefully at a later date.
I think it's worth saying as well, sorry, just to jump in there, when we go through our tendering stage, prior to development, we do pay consideration to local labour, and what we try to do is to take as many apprentices or companies that support apprentices as well when we are deciding who will work for us on the site. As a business, Taylor Wimpey West Scotland, we employ 320 people, over 320 people across our West Scotland business. 40 of those are trainees and apprentices, and this site would also support trainees and apprenticeships employed directly by Taylor Wimpey, but also within that supply chain. Every day, over 1,000 people sign into our sites, and that's through trades, through apprentices, through suppliers. So this site would form a small part of that wider picture for Taylor Wimpey West Scotland, but it would be an important part of, we think, Falkirk and our presence within Falkirk.
That's great. Thank you for that. It's good to know that you will at some point be employing locals, unless there's a complete mix-up here. And you'll also be, should this go ahead, you would also be using local contractors who would have local labour, so we could maximise the amount of employment out of this. So thank you.
Hey, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just put a small declaration that I'm the housing convener, so I won't talk particularly about certain parts. However, I know it's only planning permission in principle. I've been doing this for a number of years now. However, I do have some historical information that area was originally owned by the Cairn Iron Works, and the Cairn Iron Works did mine in that area. Is there a full mine report going to be coming from yourselves, obviously Taylor Wimpey, with this application? Because obviously that would be a concern. If it's a concern for you, never mind for us, because you could end up with a development that can't happen if it is as badly mined as I have been informed in the past. I've got other questions, but I'll start with that.
I'd like to answer that, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, so again, being planning permission in principle, the assessment of ground conditions is almost done in two stages. At this stage, we've provided a kind of desktop study, which is based on historic site investigations on the site. I believe we've also submitted a kind of coal mining hazard assessment, which reviews publicly available coal authority data and basically checks that there's nothing that we think is going to affect the development layout, albeit the next stage would be if Taylor Wimpey get consent, then they would have to do full intrusive site ground investigation works before they build on site, and that would obviously, the intention of that would be to identify any historic mining activity under the site and anything else for that matter. So absolutely any planning authority across the country will put a pre-start condition for making sure that a detailed site investigation is provided to the council's satisfaction before they can put any spade in the ground to start working.
Thank you. I can answer the question. I kind of semi-knew what was coming up, but it's an area that's not always considered as a mined area, and it was. It was part of a previous application that came out at that point. On schools, and Jim's covered a good bit of it for what will happen with Larbert High. $750,000 sounds like a lot of money, but there's not actually a lot of land at Larbert High to do anything. I don't think we could go up in a school that's got roughly 2,000 pupils in it at the moment. And I know there is a figure that Mr. Teed works out on over the Falkirk area. However, we've got specific experience here in Kinnaird. Has that been considered by you? That the Kinnaird numbers have actually come out a lot higher than other areas. And I appreciate you've given a good presentation, but I just sort of missed that. I must have missed that part.
It's possibly one more for the council's education officer to answer, but we got a recent calculation, I think in the last couple of months, in terms of contributions. I think our understanding is that the normal approach is obviously to pay contributions as long as a local authority has plans, long-term strategic plans to upgrade existing existing schools if it's deemed required. So we're essentially just following LDP policy, which requires us to make those contributions. I mean, I think this did come up at the previous pre-determination hearing. It's not really for us as applicants to influence where that money is spent once it's paid to the council. That's for officers.
Richard, we'll bring you back in again on that point for Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, it's a fair point. We don't have detailed plans for extending capacity further at Larbert High School. We've spent $3 million in recent years extending capacity of the school, but we do still have options, and it's unlikely to be options about extending outwards or upwards, but options for alterations and internal changes to increase capacity. So contributions would probably be used to that effect if required, if this development goes ahead, and other developments, because the Rufflands Farm proposal is one of several proposals, a number of developments also in the LDP. This is a speculative proposal, but there are a number of developments in the LDP as well. So it's about collective pressures on the school and managing that as best we can.
Thanks, Richard.
One last one. And again, we've got recent experience in the Larbert side of this area where affordable homes were built. And they were built, and the actual costing of them turned out to be between 240 and 250,000. And I'm sure most of us agree that's probably not what we'd call affordable housing. Can we get some detail on that from you? I'm sure you'll be able to give us an indicative cost of what the 37 houses are going to be. And if it's going to be those kind of figures, can we get that sorted early to make sure that we've got a plan going forward to make sure that they do become affordable homes?
Yeah, can I just answer that one?
Yeah.
So essentially, we deal with affordable housing across Scotland, and all local authorities essentially for new developments that require affordable housing. The price per unit or the cost per unit depends on the size of the property needed, and it depends on, again, who it goes to at the end of the day. So because this is a planning permission in principle, once that's been established and we have detailed plans framed around the size of units, the tenure of the units, we can then start to work out the cost essentially of those. And there's a number of factors play into that, but they usually are for social rent, and they usually will be an affordable value as well. I'm happy to pick that up offline as well if you want to have a discussion around providers.
Yes, that's not a problem. As I say, I try to keep my portfolio out of the planning committee, but that one in particular, we've got experience lately where they just were not affordable homes. But the housing department, I think it was Joan possibly was involved in it, did a great job to actually come up with an agreement with the developer. I'm trying to get, if this does go ahead, let's get the problems out the road to start with, so that we're not coming back to planning and then you're blocking sites and things like that through having to keep coming back to planning committees. I'm not saying that I'm made my mind up what way I'm going on it. I just would prefer to get as much dealt with as possible beforehand. I'll leave it at that at the moment, convener, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes, for your input. Any other member, either here, Provost Bissett?
Thanks very much, convener. Thanks for your presentation, Colin. I just want to ask a bit about the equation on affordable homes. Are some of these for rent, or are they just for sale?
Yeah, so they could be for rent. At this stage, we wouldn't have any agreement with an affordable provider, but normally we would aim to have a mixture of social rent, mid-market rent, or potentially low-cost home ownership. I would say primarily what we deal with is social rent across certainly east of Scotland and central Scotland, and there is a mixture of mid-market rent in there as well. Okay, and the open space, the 1.67 hectares, wonder if you talk a bit more about the open space and what might be provided?
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible to share the master plan graphic again. Yeah, I think acknowledging the site's location, obviously we think it infills the settlement, but it's the edge of settlement, so the open space is delivered in a number of ways. There'll be parks within the site. There'll be landscaped areas that are informal. There'll be formal kind of planting and screening. So at this stage, there is a separate landscape and visual impact assessment which talks in a bit more detail about what's required. But you can see there that if you were to, we think there's a very good ratio in terms of the amount of development space compared to the amount of green space being left within the site. So right along the south there, where the blue you might see the blue dash line, that's the kind of drainage basin. There'll be a lot of open space to the north of that. There's also big pockets of open space next to Rufflands Drive and along the top at Webster Avenue and New Carron Road. So that's been kind of shown at this stage as an intent to try and soften the development, to try and make it integrate with its surroundings, noting that across the road is a field, and really to round off the settlement so that there's not a really hard edge of buildings or housing. But as we've been saying, I should say it's very much an indicative plan at the moment, and we would be expected to provide much more detail in terms of what type of equipment goes, if it's swings, if it's roundabout, if it's trim trails, things like that. That would all come at the next stage. But we've worked out our unit numbers based on leaving a really significant amount of open space, because that's the way we want to approach the site.
We also believe there's great opportunities on this site to enhance biodiversity and try and create wildlife areas within the development that'll be attractive for the residents living there. So we'd be looking to offer some sort of biodiversity kind of net gain on the site, looking at introducing sort of bat and bird boxes, hedgehog highways and things, and really make it an attractive place to live with that access to usable green space for residents, for existing residents as well, for roundabout areas who want to walk across the site and really enjoy it as well.
Okay, thanks, Naomi. The other question I was wanting to ask was about the properties themselves. How, like, we're trying to achieve net zero. What will they be constructed of? Solar panels on the roofs and heat pumps, stuff like that?
I'll maybe let one of my clients take over in a sec, but yeah, we've at planning permissions principle stage, we've submitted an energy statement with the application, which effectively sets out a commitment to provide, houses that incorporate low and zero carbon generating technologies, all the different technologies that's required through the building control regulations, so that the actual detail of the materials, how the houses are built, that would come at a later stage. But Taylor Wimpey's obviously got its own sustainability kind of charter and commitment to that. I don't know if you want to say more about that, Phil.
Yeah, thanks very much. So the homes will be low energy. They will be sustainable, normally timber frame construction. They will incorporate solar panels normally, and because of building regulation changes, there will be no gas on the site as well. So we think at this moment in time, subject to detailed proposals, it'd be an air source heat pump or the likes that would be the main heat source for properties like this.
Okay. Another question, would there be any traffic management along Webster Avenue, like traffic lights, or people crossing from one development to the other?
I believe there's a requirement for a crossing at the north part of the site to get to the cross at the roundabout at the top. But in terms of New Carron Road, because of obviously, I think the reason the two accesses are to the east is because obviously it wouldn't be possible, or wouldn't be the roads department wouldn't like us to try and take an access off that road. So that's why the 2 accesses are around that other side, because it's quieter and it doesn't add any more traffic to, well, it won't have any new traffic turning out into New Carron Road. So as far as I'm aware, there's no requirement for actual traffic coming on New Carron Road. But going back to one of the points made earlier, the new access points, although this is planning in principle, we provided a level of detailed design drawing looking at visibility displays, road geometry, etc., which is closer to a detailed planning submission, because we wanted to prove to both planning and roads that these access points are deliverable, and they'll obviously come with whatever footways and verges, etc., are required through roads guidance.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks, Robert, for your input. Councillor Forrest.
Hi, thank you. It was a question that the Provost just asked that's making me ask this one. You've mentioned the open space, the trim tracks, the swings, the roundabouts, bat boxes, etc. Who would maintain this should the development go ahead? Would it be yourselves, or would you be charging the tenants for factors, or would you expect the council to do it?
So the development such as this would be factor maintained. So the residents would pay a contribution towards the factor, and they would take on responsibility for the open space, for maintenance of the open space. So there'd be no cost to the council for that. It'd be down to us to select a factor to get the open space ready for handover, and then hand it over at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you for your input. I'm looking on the screen. Is there anybody remote who would like to ask any questions at this stage to the applicant's agent? We'll finish with that one. I'll maybe ask a question before we go. In relation to, I think you mentioned briefly about the NHS. Now, this has always been problematic with planning applications. And it's a very, very major and serious issue. What sort of dialogue have you had with them?
We've not a direct dialogue with them. That what they would they're obviously formally consulted, and I think trying to get hold of someone at the NHS to discuss it is problematic without generalising. So my experience is, and hopefully the case officer will agree, that they tend to come in quite late with their responses. What will happen at that point is there may not be, but if there's a sum of money being requested, then that's something Taylor Wimpey will have to consider as to whether they're willing to accept that payment. But I'm sure without committing them to it, they'd have to consider that and confirm whether or not they're willing to go ahead on that basis.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anybody else got a question of the applicant's agent? None? Okay, and you can retake your seats now. Thank you. Just at this stage, I'm going to ask, is there any statutory consultees online? Any statutory consultees online? Okay. Okay, thank you. At this stage, as the convener myself, will invite other persons who have submitted representations, including objectors or supporters, to speak in terms of their representations submitted in response to the planning proposal. Each party will normally be permitted to address the committee once for up to 5 minutes. So I believe that we'll have two objectors with us this evening. Have we? Would they like to step forward? Hi. Yeah. Okay, thank you. You'll have 5 minutes once I say 5 minutes. But first of all, have you made submitted representations in objection to this during the process? Yep, that's fine. Okay, I was just checking that. Okay, if you could just tell us who you are and then carry on with your submission. You've got 5 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity then for members of the committee to ask any questions. Okay? Okay, thank. And if you want to bring that closer to yourself, because we have people online there maybe not hear you. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, convener, I can't hear anything.
You could maybe get right close to it. I know it's difficult.
Sorry again, convener. All I could hear was Mr. Henderson's paper flipping.
Okay, well, if you
Couldn't hear
just
anything.
bear with us for a minute, we'll get you to start again, and our officer will try and. But you.
Okay, is that better? That sounds better, yeah. Okay.
I just want to start again. Tell us who you are, addresses, and give it 5 minutes.
Okay, so it's Mr. and Mrs. Dalgleish, and we live in Doon Crescent, which is adjacent to the proposed development. We submitted objections initially when the planning application went out, and I think we did engage with at the community events. I think it was an online event, and we did engage with that. So just this recent event, we only found out about it in the local newspaper. We've not had any further letters to us asking about it, and it's very difficult. Actually, even the article in the paper didn't say that this was a public meeting, so neighbours do know about it, but they didn't think that they were able to come along and attend tonight. It said that it was streamed online, but there was no link to join. I emailed the planning department and my email was blocked. I phoned Falkirk Council and asked how I could do that, and they said you couldn't speak to planning over the phone, you had to submit an email. So I was given planning@falkirk.gov.uk, but the email came back saying that it was blocked. So really, I think it's indicative that there's nobody else here and there's been no objections from local residents because of the lack of engagement.
You've explained that to us, and we'll look into that, but you've now got 5 minutes to tell us what your objections are. That's
Okay.
the important thing that you've got.
Right. So I think it would be Labbert High is probably one of the biggest schools in Scotland. It's already near capacity. And if you're adding more, and obviously I think it was Councillor Flynn said about other developments in the area. So it's just, you know, the impact that has on the local schools. We've got a health board that's in special measures. And, you know, A&E waiting times and things like that. GP surgeries are full. You know, I appreciate you've not had a response from the NHS, but there is. And that there's also the traffic. That's quite a bad road. You've spoke about the access from Rufflands onto Webster Avenue and blind spots, and that would be a concern, a safety concern. This proposed access to link in with core paths, I'm not sure if that's going to cross the New Cairn Road at some point or if it just comes straight down. And I think just generally from listening this evening, what is there, it's very difficult to understand because things could change. So there's this plan with 1.6 hectares of green space, etc. But I'm hearing that that could really change. It's not really final. I think just like the safety issues with the road, the impact on local schools, healthcare, and then I'm not sure what the final arrangements will be because we live there, and I think my main concern was I have a lovely view. I see the sunrise in the morning. I can see the Forth Bridges, and if the build house is there, I'm not going to have that. I know that's selfish, but that's just.
If you just sit there, there's an opportunity now for members to maybe ask you some questions, okay? And the issue that you brought up initially about maybe a lack of consultation, then that will be looked at by our officers, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, members of the committee, any questions to Mr. and Mrs. Dalgleish? None here, any on remote? None there. Okay, then you can retake your seats, and thank you very much for your submission. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Going down the hearing procedures, it's an opportunity now on number 8 is that the applicant or the agent will have the right of reply to any points raised by any party heard by the committee. So if you want to come back up there, I'm sure you've been taking notes. If you just bear with us for a couple of minutes, we've got a technical problem here. Okay, then let's reconvene this meeting. As I stated, that in the hearing procedures, we're now at 8, which is the applicant or agent will have the right of reply to any points raised by any party heard by the committee. So, but you don't introduce any new information. Anything that's been said by anybody, then you've got a right to reply to that, but no putting anything else in. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Really just a point of clarification for Mr. and Mrs. Dalgleish and possible members of the committee, just to say this is not a fresh submission or a revised submission. This is still the same planning application that was lodged in November 2022. It's just that there's been a second predetermination hearing because of the amount of time the application's been in for. So from our point of view, we've fulfilled our obligations in terms of community consultation. I think maybe the point's more about the council processes, which obviously we can't comment on, but I just wanted to emphasise there's not been a new submission, it's still the same one. With regards to the other points about education and landscaping, etc., I think they've all been covered earlier on this evening, so I don't want to add any more on that. Thank you very much.
You want to come in and see your hand up, sir?
Yeah, so just a very quick one as well, just on the detail. I think there was mention around the detail of application. This is obviously a two-stage process. So the PPP application, then that is followed on by the AMSC application, which would then set the detail of that consent. And that's where detail around the open space, for example, would be confirmed at that point in time. Obviously, there is a lot of high-quality open space around about the site. You've got the Helix Park close by as well. But in terms of
you're expanding there. We're touching on what Mr. and Mrs. Dalgleish has stated, and you're getting a wee bit over that.
So in terms of the 1.6 hectares of open space on site, that is all calculated via the calculation within planning policy. So it's important to have that, and that would, we think, feed through the detailed stage of the application.
Okay, thank you for that. If that she's finished, you can retake your seats then, and thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to 9 on your planning procedures here. The members of the committee will be invited to question any party heard by the committee or may seek guidance on factual or legal matters from council officers after each presentation. So it's wide open in relation to the members asking questions of any party this evening. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. I'm having technical problems here. It was just really, I raised it before regarding objections. I noticed that on the last time it was raised, I think in 2022, there were 93 objections against the proposed scheme. I just wonder from anyone how many people wrote in support of it. That was my only question. Thank you.
You're talking about anybody that contacted, no objector, but supporters?
Yep, any supporter whatsoever, yep.
Go to our planning officer, Catherine Chorley. Catherine?
We have them recorded as all objections.
Okay. Thank you, convener. So is that the most up-to-date 93 objections from that last time? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your input, sir. I believe that is Councillor Kerr. You're coming through very vaguely, but I can make out your glasses. So have you got a question, sir?
I think Councillor Bowes is before me, convener.
On you go, James.
The deputation with regards to the proposal and something that you brought up, convener, regarding the health board. So if we get to a stage where officers have brought forward their proposal or the recommendations, will the lack of transparency from the health board stop this application from going forward? Because whether it's a yes or a no, people need to know. That's my first question.
We'll get somebody to answer that, but I think you know, Councillor Bailey Kerr, you've been here for a long time, and we know that the NHS has been absolutely ridiculously slow in coming forward with any information for planning applications over the years. It's been disgraceful, actually. That's the word for it. What, an officer going to come in? Catherine? Catherine?
We've certainly spent quite a lot of time tracing the NHS, repeated requests for responses on this application. I think there comes a time where we have to make a recommendation. If they're not requesting a contribution, then we have to progress the application. I don't know whether, Bernard, you want to come in? No.
Okay, any other questions, Councillor Kerr?
Yep, I'm happy with that answer, convener. Most of the questions I had were asked by a lot of other elected members, but my concern is raised by Mr. and Mrs. Dalglish, where people of the public can't get in contact or can't contact officers. Is this a procedure that's in place, or is it are they just unfortunate about that?
Okay. We're losing you, Bailey Kerr. So I think
Did you hear my question?
Yes, we did, but you didn't finalise it. What's the question again?
The question is that the procedure that people can only get in contact with plan officers through email? Or is it just, or Mr. and Mrs. Douglas just unfortunate that it's happened to them?
Okay, thank you. I'll put you on to Mr. Broadley, who's going to answer that question. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Bailey, through yourself, Councillor Kerr. It's just to reassure members that officers have to receive email representations, and the case officer, Catherine Chorley, has stated in section 7 in the report, 93 objections were received. Members of the public have also been written to. Our colleagues in governance have confirmed the objectors at the previous stage also received letters at this stage as well. That's just been confirmed as well. We'll certainly look into that, and obviously the case officer is also offered to come and speak to Mr. and Mrs. Dalglish after the meeting in case there's a specific. I suspect it's around our standard emails that go out, and perhaps the answer that you got on that. But I can confirm that members of the public have had that chance, and they have been contacted by email, by letter, sorry, and those representations have been made. I don't know if my colleagues, either Catherine or Bernard, want to answer any more on that. No. Yeah, so the representations have been made, Councillor Kerr. We'll certainly look into that in terms of the very specifics that Mrs. Dalglish mentioned there. But members of the public have had the chance. They have been lettered direct through the post, and the case officer has received 93 objections as outlined in section 7 of the report. So it says to me that the members of the public have had that chance, and they have made their comments known to the officers, which are listed extensively in section 7.2 of the report.
And my last question, Convener, if possible, and I know it'll be quite a hard question to answer, but when we envisage this to come before the Planning Committee?
Well, I'll go back to officers in relation to this. What members have got to understand as well is we've still got to go out on a site visit for this. That's still to be organised as well. But I'm going to go back to Mr. Broadley.
Thanks very much through yourself, Convener. Yes, I think at this stage we probably couldn't commit to the next date for this. The November Planning Committee, the deadline, members will be aware of the changes to standing orders, so the deadlines for those reports are a matter of weeks away now, and there's been a number of issues raised tonight. So the report hasn't been written, so it's important that officers take the time to take on board the issues that have been raised tonight. And as Bailey has just said, that we've still got the site visit to go. I'm aware that there's not a December Planning Committee. So I think unless we make November, which I think is highly unlikely given site visits have still to take place and the report's still to be written, it's more than likely to be into the new year in January. But that will be subject to our discussions with colleagues in governance and subject to the timetable of a site visit for members.
Thanks, Mr. Broadley. Is that your last question, Bailey Kerr?
Yes, Convener, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councillor Bowes, then Councillor Murtagh.
Thank you. One again on a similar subject. If it's going to be January, how are we sitting with determination period on it? Are we? Because I know it's been away. I know it's been quite a while coming to this stage. Are we going to be looking at falling foul of it?
Catherine.
We have a processing agreement in place on this application, which expires towards the end of this month. It will be open to the applicants and ourselves to discuss whether we want to extend that to a mutually agreeable date. So the application is still in time at the moment.
Thanks, Catherine. One for Mr. Henderson, and it's maybe not for describing tonight, but it might be worth for bringing back to the meeting. It was mentioned earlier on about the Moss End appeal, which is, as you know, I love sitting reading legal matters. So maybe not tonight, but probably for committee. Can we get, how does that, everybody's waited for this, how does that affect this application? How does that law affect it?
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Bowes. I think you're absolutely right, and I'm slightly relieved we wouldn't discuss that in detail tonight. But yes, that will be covered off in the officer's report and the implications around the Moss End Court of Session decision. Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Bowes? That was a very interesting question. Councillor Murtagh.
I'm also spectacularly glad, Convener, that we're not going to discuss the minutiae of that decision tonight. But it is a crucial point, and obviously part of why we've had to come back, not just on this predetermination hearing, but others. And as others picked up, perhaps we could just have a simple clarification. It can be outside of committee in terms of what I recall from previous procedures, from a previous predetermination that had to be redone, as it were, or because of the Moss End, that all objectors, whether they were, and there's no supporters in this case, but all supporters and objectors that had previously put in their submissions or had added new ones in the intervening time, they were re-lettered, actually physically re-lettered just before the new predetermination hearing. And it would be good just outside the committee to get some confirmation that that process was followed in the same way, because that's maybe where there's, if that's not been done again for this particular predetermination hearing, then that would be a bit concerning, but it would be good to get clarity on that. The thing I wanted to raise in terms of the application was about the education situation, and I know that we've obviously had many of these meetings before, and we're used to understanding in terms of the education capacity statements for each school, and that question about whether there's expandable space. I think Mr. Teed said that we have options, as it were, in terms of in Larbert High, and that there's not planned expansion at this stage, but there are potential options that could allow expansion, and that usually follows a certain criteria. But I wonder whether, in light of recent discussions about wider education capacity, and I'm thinking particularly about Larbert High, it's very pertinent that there might not be a little bit more detailed assessment, that it's not just about, for example, classroom space, but the ability to it's not just a case of, well, we can fund more teachers, as it were, because of the wider landscape, but also for example, the sort of support structures at Larbert, even when you take into account the school dining hall, which is, I think, a capacity of about 600, but on which you have 2,000 pupils trying to have capacity. So I think, given the special circumstances at Larbert, if we could have a little bit more of an assessment about what the possible options could be, because from previous applications in Kinnaird, I recall that it was a material consideration that we could look at for and against an application as to whether it was that we could grant it at all. It's not just about the contribution level, not just about the capacity in classroom and teaching, but whether there's wider circumstances, and that would be helpful in this case.
Okay, before I bring in Richard, I'm going to go to Mr. Miller in relation to the first part of your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. It was. I just wish to reassure you that our records show that letters were issued to all objectors from the previous application, included all 97. It was issued on the 4th of September. We will certainly investigate why it appears that some have not received that letter. We have received responses from people who were lettered, so we can be assured that certainly some objectors have received these letters.
Thanks for that clarity, Jim. Richard, would you like to come in the second part of Councillor Murtagh's question?
Apologies, convener. There's we can expand on the information in the consultation response for the next committee if that's agreeable. Yeah, on the basis of Councillor Murtagh's questions. Absolutely, yeah, not a problem.
You happy with that, Councillor Murtagh? Thank you. Have you any other questions? None. Councillor Sinclair.
Thanks, convener. Just in the back of some of the comments there, I wonder if it's possible for some detail to be provided at the next stage, whenever that may be, around about additional support needs capacity within the area. And because obviously from an educational perspective, I think a lot of the focus tends to be on mainstream, but enhanced provision and ASN form a crucial part of our education provision, and I wonder if that could be included within that. Thank you.
Richard.
Yeah, we can include that as well, although it's very hard to pin that down to kind of developments at a scale. Sometimes the larger developments is easy to explain the impacts for more specialist provision, but we'll add some information on that as well.
Happy with that, Councillor Sinclair?
Content, can you?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Teed. Any other questions from members at this stage? Provost Bissett.
Just like to ask a fairly straightforward question. On the objectors, you go through the list, there's one for Gargunnock, one from Windsor Milton, one for Glasgow, one for Tullibody, Clickmat. Are these, how can they, if it's a local issue, how can they object? Somebody for Gargunnock object?
Well, I think
it's just a thought. I mean, it seems a bit strange.
I
I live here, I would object to something in Gargunnock.
Well, I think it's no the first time, and it won't be the last time in planning applications where you go through them and you think to yourself, wait a minute, they don't even live in the area and they're objecting. So it's just one of these things. Everybody has got an opportunity in terms of openness and transparency.
Like,
and,
so anybody, so you could, anywhere across Scotland, you could just object?
They can object.
Okay, right.
And as I say, it's a bit galling sometimes, and what it can do, it can maybe turn the tide for an application. You see 150 objections in, and maybe 100 people don't even live in the area. We've had it before.
I think there's about 20 here, I think.
Yeah, okay, but you just take cognizance of what's in front of you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Provost. Okay, then, that takes us to and the hearing procedures takes us to 10. Members of the committee may identify any other planning issues that they wish to see addressed in the report to the meeting of council that will consider the application. So I think we've brought up, I'll go back to Mr. Henderson. I think there have been a few questions that's been asked for further information, and I'm quite sure that you've taken a note of those, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, indeed. Notes have been taken of the requests for information in the report to the planning committee, and these will be drawn out in the minute of the meeting and passed to the planning officer. Thank you, Convener.
Okay. I would ask at this stage that we once again we contact the NHS. I mean, it's always difficult to get a response, but the fact is it's so important an issue for everybody in our community that we're going to ensure that the NHS and that is feasible for everybody. So I would like if we could make contact with the NHS again in relation to this and get them to support it. Any other questions and planning issues that they wish to see addressed, or is everybody happy? Councillor Flynn. And Councillor Bowes. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. Just one thing, and the people that have already spoken will know that Webster Avenue locally has a bit of a reputation of being for a number of accidents having happened in it. It's particularly down towards the junction just past this site. Can we, I know it's maybe, I don't know if it's too much to ask you, Gary, can you check that for us for the main committee and just sort of get the details? There may not be a lot of people killed, but I think there is. I think it's been an area where there's been quite a few accidents over the years, especially you come down that hill. And at any AC point, it definitely becomes a problem because for those who don't know the site, it is on a hill. There's quite a slope on the hill for here.
Through yourself, Convener, I can answer that now if you wish, and I could provide an update at the full planning committee.
Happy to have it just at the committee, Gary.
No worries. Thanks, Councillor Bowes.
Thank you for that, Gary. Is there any? Councillor Flynn, have you got your light on? It's difficult to see from here. Carry
Yes,
on, sir.
yes, I have, convener. It was just really, you mentioned quite rightly contacting the NHS, but I think it's worthwhile pointing out that the responsibility for general practice has moved this year under the auspices of the Integrated Joint Board. So perhaps, as well as the NHS, with regard to general practice, not regard to the hospital as such, although it does come under the IGB as well. I'm only suggesting it might be worth contacting, you know, the head of the Integrated Joint Board to see if they've any information or if they're allowed to object. I don't know, but it's just a point of clarity. Thanks.
Thank you for your words of wisdom there. I'm quite sure we'll check that out. Okay then, once again, members of the committee, can you identify any other planning issues that you want to see addressed? Is everybody happy? Okay, that would just close the predetermination hearing. I'd like to thank all members and officials and members of the public and the applicant's agent and colleagues for coming, those on remote, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.